Welcome to the Her Earth Medicine podcast. I am Sandy Ross, practitioner of traditional Chinese medicine and naturopathic medicine for 14 years. I am so happy to talk about pyrroles today on the podcast because it's something I see a lot in clinic, and I'm using it more and more as a diagnostic tool and just getting amazing results over the last few years when we can really, pinpoint people have this as part of the whole picture for their health. So I've brought Michelle on. She's a young, savvy naturopath from Canberra, and I think you're going to get a lot out of this episode. So let's dive in, talking with Michelle about pyrroles. Okay, welcome to the Her Earth Medicine podcast today, Michelle.
Hi, Sandy. Thanks so much for having me on here.
Thank you for joining us, Michelle. We're just making that very clear because there's some mix up with the names. Basically today I've asked you to come on because you're a savvy young naturopath. You seem to be very good at educating. You have a booked out practice, which is amazing. So you're going to be doing a bit of marketing sharing in our part 2 of this. But to start with, we are going to chat mostly for our patients that have had a diagnosis with themselves or with children, perhaps, for pyrroles. So before we get chatting about pyrroles, do you want to tell us a little bit about yourself and how you fell into being a naturopath and working? Are you in Adelaide?
No, in Canberra.
In Canberra. Well, I really have it wrong this morning, don't I?
Going well.
Yeah, go on. Tell us about yourself.
Yeah, I finished studying maybe 5 to 6 years ago. I originally started doing an advanced diploma of nutritional medicine, I think my gap year after school. Loved that, ended up doing an extra 5 or 6 months and qualified to be a naturopath as well. My eldest sister, she's also a naturopath, so we've always been influenced around, the holistic sort of healing and medicine growing up from a young age, which was great. And then started working in a health food store in Canberra, and business just kind of developed from there. Yeah. Yep.
Okay. And how did you kind of fall into using things like Pyrroles testing and DNA and using more of the functional medicine approach?
I've always had I've always been a bit of an investigator. So I remember when I was younger, I always wanted to be like an archaeologist or a treasure hunter, wanting to get to the bottom of things. I think my brain is always looking to get to the root cause of things, like lots of naturopaths. My partner has Pyroluria as well. So I guess working through that with him has been a big eye-opener for me. I've done a lot of genetic testing on myself, my family, or my clients. I just like to really know, what's driving things and how to get to the bottom of it and have that full picture sort of happening.
Okay, cool. So let's start off with pyrroles, and it has many names, so if you want to go through them, you can. and just basically starting off with, what is it?
Yeah, sure. So I might break it down into 2 parts. I'll go more, I guess, a little technical, like what it actually is, and then the way I explain it to my clients to make it more easy to understand. So pyrroles is basically a biochemical imbalance in the body. It causes a build-up of pyrroles. So pyrroles themselves, they're a waste product of hemoglobin. So we all do produce the pyrroles. However, those with Pyroluria do release excess amounts in the urine, which can be neurotoxic. The thing is, these are fine in small amounts, but in large amounts they do bind to zinc and B6 in the body. So as a result, we do have that constant depletion sort of happening, and a lot of symptoms do occur as a result. So I kind of say to my clients, it's like, having a bucket with a hole in it, that hole is allowing all your nutrients to seep out, so especially the zinc and magnesium, B6, etc. We need to know kind of what's put that hole in the first place there. So looking at things like, leaky gut, childhood trauma, all that sort of stuff. So with pyrroles, we know it's genetic. So we do often see it run through family history, which you've probably seen as well, Sandy, in clinic. You'll often see, the parents have, will have it as well, or, we'll link to, does your mum have similar traits, or your dad, etc. I guess, do you want me maybe talk about some of the symptoms? Or
Yep, yeah, definitely.
Yeah, so I guess we kind of see a cluster of symptoms come through clinic. So we kind of see mental health issues, so obviously anxiety, depression, irritability, mood swings. We can have oversensitivity in children, can be quite a common thing. We can see hormonal issues, poor immune system, digestive weaknesses, and a whole cascade of symptoms. So I guess a few red flags for me I see when people come into clinic is we do have that mental health issue. So whether it is, the anxiety or the mood, often, they'll say, I've always had painful periods or irregular periods or issues there. When I was younger, I had a poor immune system. I'm always getting sick. I find fatigue is a big driver too, so I do test this in a lot of my fatigue clients. And then sometimes I do tie it into fertility as well. So I do see pyroluria can be a big thing for infertility, whether it's coming from the female counterpart or the male. They can really open up to so many more symptoms than just that.
Okay. Yeah, I mostly use Pyrroles with things like ADHD, sometimes in cancer, and lots with kids and their, moods and behaviour. Yeah, that's
true. Yeah, ADHD, autism.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, schizophrenia, bipolar, alcoholism in family history, all of that.
And so what are you using for testing? Are you using the urine test?
Yeah. So there's probably applied chemical labs as the gold standard, which I think most practitioners would know, which would be a urine test. However, availability sometimes is hard. So in Canberra, it's actually really hard to test through applied analytical labs. So I use Naturopath personally, only because it's what's available to me.
Okay.
Yeah. But yeah, so it is a urine test. It's quite an odd test, I guess. So generally you have to pee in the dark, wrap it in foil, freeze it. A courier will come to your house to pick it up. That's if it's through Naturopath. Are you using applied analytical where you are, Sandy? Or?
Yeah, sometimes depending. I'll sometimes use Safe Analytical or Naturopath as well. So, but I find the Naturopath test is pretty good as well.
Yeah, I find definitely still get quite good results with that too. And sometimes too, I don't always test. Generally I prefer to, but some clients will say, look, it could be possible, especially if we've done, the Pyrroles questionnaire, they've scored more than 15. Then I'll say, look, give me 4 to 6 weeks, let's trial it. I'll be able to know by then, based on your response, if that's something we're looking at, and we kind of go from there with some people as well.
Yes. So, that's another thing I also use is the Pyrroles questionnaire. Can I ask which one you're using?
Oh, I would have to maybe link it for you, Sandy. It's just saved on my desktop. Yeah, I think there's about 36 questions in there.
Yep. Okay.
Yeah.
I think I use the one from Trudy Scott. I'm pretty sure I'm using hers.
Okay, I think mine, is pretty similar.
Yep. Okay.
So we know on that questionnaire there's quite specific questions. So clients are often doing this is a weird question, sensitivity to light or to sound or, dislike of protein or morning nausea, white spots on nails. They're quite specific questions. So I think we get a really good insight from starting with that when we start to see those red flags come through.
Yep, definitely. Yeah. So you've mentioned leaky gut and childhood trauma. Do you think there's some other factors that can cause an increase in Pyrroles? So, people might have had treatment and then it goes up again because of life. What are those particular things that you note?
Yeah, so definitely life stresses will be a big thing. Infections as well is huge. So, if there has been glandular fever or something, I find that can be a trigger, or if someone has got sick a lot of times in a row, so quite frequently. But I do find a lot of it comes down to gut health, and sort of treating the gut, we'll start to see better results with treatment once we go there.
100%, yeah.
Yeah, my partner, when I started treating him, he was going well, but it wasn't until I tested his stool and, he had leaky gut and elevated beta-glucuron a days. It wasn't until we started sort of treating that we've seen better outcomes with the Pyrroles treatment.
And you're right, it's like the leaky bucket, right? So you're losing those nutrients. If you just keep giving someone the B6 and the zinc and the GLA without getting to that root cause, then, they're going to have to be on them for a very long time, where if you get to the root cause...
100%. And during, periods of stress, there will be that increased demand, and they will need to use more zinc and B6 during that time as well, so...
Okay. What other testing are you using to follow it up? So say you might do the urine test, it comes back with a high level of Pyrroles. What other tests? Yeah. So you mentioned gut testing. What else are you using?
Yeah. So generally I'll do comprehensive bloods always. And sometimes even looking at people's bloods, I might get red flags if pyroluria could be an issue. So I guess doing full blood count, looking at the biochemistry, liver, kidneys, electrolytes, checking iron and B12, we often do see issues there. So I do find most of my Pyrroles clients do have lower NB12. And I guess that's due to, that poor stomach acid production with the zinc and B6. Check full thyroid. I will do comprehensive stool testing if relevant, and generally for most of my clients I say will be needed at some stage in treatment. And then often we're looking into the thyroid and adrenals as well, just due to that long-term stress dysfunction too.
Okay.
Are
you using any hair tissue testing for?
Yes, I forgot about that one. Yes, often that's quite important too. Looking at the trace nutrients that we often need, so specifically, manganese and molybdenum I like to look. It does give us a good insight of their thyroid function as well, but I guess most importantly, like we do see the heavy metals on there, which is incredibly important because that toxic load is often quite high in Pyrroles plants too.
Definitely. And it gives you the copper as well in there. Yeah.
Exactly. You can store tissue copper.
Yeah, because it can be an easy test to request for a GP, but sometimes they won't. They often don't want to do ceruloplasma, so I do find getting that. Yeah.
I'm pretty lucky. I've got a few really good GPs in Canberra where they will literally do all the tests I ask for them. So they'll do the zinc, copper, ceruloplasm, no questions asked, or bulk build, which is fab.
All bulk build, that's great. Yeah.
And then from that, I'll work out the percentage of free copper, and then I'll know how bad this problem is as well, and how slow we need to go with treatment.
Do you want to explain that a little bit? Could you go into the percentage of the free copper there?
Yeah, sure. So free copper is basically, so we've got zinc, copper, ceruloplasm that we test. So often zinc will generally be low, copper will be high. Then we've got ceruloplasm, which is the protein that carries copper around the body. So free copper, we're looking at copper that's not actually bound to that ceruloplasm. So it's just floating in the body, causing more havoc and leading to those sort of copper excess symptoms.
Okay, awesome.
So it's kind of like a 5-stage process I'll go through to, working out that free copper. And generally we want that about 5 to 20%, where I find most Pyroluria people are easily 30 to 40% or more.
Definitely. Okay, so I think that's probably, I can't think of many other tests. I mean, potentially genetic testing, obviously, methylation, histamine can come into it as well.
Yes, definitely. Generally, we see a bit of histamine issues or, that estrogen dominant sort of picture as well.
They all start to kind of cross over, don't they?
And THFR is very common too, so sometimes we will look at, whole blood histamine, but also homocysteine is really important because you'll need to be mindful of the zinc and B6. You don't want that B6 to lower homocysteine too much, because then that can create a problem in itself. Yeah.
And this is why you need a practitioner.
100%. Pyrroles can be quite complicated, but life-changing once you can treat it.
Yes.
Definitely life-changing for a lot of people.
Definitely. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about the treatment. So I didn't want to make this too full-on, obviously, and people to be totally self-prescribing, but there are some gold standards that we often use for Pyrroles. So did you want to go into them?
Yeah, sure. So I think every practitioner will treat Pyrroles differently. So I guess I'm just going to go through what I generally do and what I find works well. So we all know zinc and B6 is, of course, absolutely crucial, and so is magnesium. The dose of these can vary dramatically though. So generally speaking, like for zinc, you can use from 25 to 200 milligrams of zinc. But, you would never do that without supervision from your practitioner. B6 can vary as well. Magnesium, I'm usually using about 600 milligrams daily of elemental magnesium, just depending on the client. And often, we are chucking in that whole food vitamin C as well. So they're kind of my gold standards. Then we do have, your evening primrose oil, which is quite important. Sometimes we are using that manganese or molybdenum to help bring down that copper more as well. So just depends, what all the results are sort of showing.
What kind of forms of zinc do you prefer to use?
I'm using zinc citrate usually, or chelate. I prefer not to use the picolate initially, just because it does require good stomach acid to break it down. So we know those with Pyroluria initially don't have the best of stomach acid. But yeah, generally zinc citrate would be my go-to.
Okay, and do you often find patients might get a copper dump if you start too high? Because I feel like if people are going to listen to this and self-prescribe, we should probably talk about that.
Definitely don't self-prescribe. It can definitely make things worse if you don't know what you're doing. So generally I do start quite a small dose and I'll keep them on that for a few weeks and then slowly build that up. I will say to them, if I say, for example, because I'll use a supplement which has the zinc and B6 combined in it. So I'll say to them, if we're going not good and we're on 2 zinc a day and we up you to 3 and you start to feel worse, we drop it straight back down to bring you back to normal, because obviously that dose is too high and we're having a bit of the copper dumping come in. So yeah, definitely need to be very careful with it and go super slow. Don't think more is better, because you will feel worse.
What are the symptoms of a copper dump?
I find it can be whatever the symptoms the client presents with is usually what we can see present stronger. So generally I find mood is the biggest thing. So heightened anxiety or insomnia, we can definitely have headaches, can be quite common. More irritable. They would probably be like the key things I reckon I would sort of see as the most dominant symptoms, or just feeling, a bit blurred, not right, something's not right.
Yeah, I like to think of them as like liver detoxification symptoms,
100%,
really.
Yeah, quite similar, just stirs the pot a little bit.
Okay, and so can you explain, this is a question I get all the time from patients, but why we're using things like the evening primrose or the GLAs over the pure omega-3s?
Yeah, so with Pyroluria, we often see more of an imbalance between the omega-3 omega-6 ratio. So omega-6 is more preferable because there's a much higher demand for it. So generally speaking, we do have omega-3, which is anti-inflammatory, but a lot of clients with Pyroluria can actually feel a lot worse. So I've had clients on omega-3 not prescribed by me during treatment, but, by a skin specialist, and their symptoms have actually exacerbated quite dramatically with that. So I guess it's more pro-inflammatory with them.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
And I was wondering if you can touch on the stomach acid component there, because you've mentioned it a few times, but I feel like people might be going, so why? What's with the stomach acid being low?
Yes, so generally we'll always see low stomach acid. So zinc and B6 are the 2 key nutrients that actually produce good stomach acid. So if you don't have those nutrients, you're not going to make good stomach acid, and you're going to have a lot of digestive symptoms occur. So more bloating, more food intolerances. Generally, you might see constipation in some clients, or diarrhea due to that zinc deficiency. So they'd be sort of the main reasons. Yeah, stomach acid is a huge thing for Pyroluria.
And so is that something that you prescribe, like betaine hydrochloride, or are you hoping that with the zinc and the B6 or slowing down their nervous system even, that they're going to be producing more?
Yeah, generally speaking, I'll go from that perspective first. So normally I'll just see how they're responding with the zinc and B6, working on that stress response, calming down the adrenals. And then if need be, or there's still underlying issue, I'll go in with some betaine hydrochloride or, some apple cider vinegar or something to help stimulate those gastric juices.
Okay, awesome. Yeah. And I love starting with things like like apple cider vinegar and the bitters and the pungent herbs, sometimes getting them on the table. Yeah, that's a great place to start.
Definitely a good way to start.
So could we maybe just touch on, before we'll come back to treatment a little bit, but I wanted to just touch on the neurotransmitter component, because I feel like these are just questions popping up in my brain as we chat. But could you maybe just link why people have mental health conditions if they have the Pyrroles?
Yeah, so with Pyrroles, we're seeing the zinc and B6 are strongly needed to produce many neurotransmitters in our body. So if you don't have those nutrients, we'll often see, low serotonin, low dopamine, low GABA, and as a result, those symptoms will occur. So low GABA, obviously we can see sleep and anxiety, low serotonin, or that depressive sort of state.
And this is why I love Pyrroles, because, for so many years, I mean, I've probably only been using Pyrroles testing for, I don't know, maybe 5 or 7 years. Not that long, probably something like that, because I've been practicing for 14 years, and it was definitely around, but it wasn't such a big thing. It wasn't until I worked at NIM with basically functional medicine doctors, and I started doing a lot more. But it's such a great thing, because for so many years, we did prescribe, things like GABA or the precursors of serotonin, or, tyrosine for your dopamine. And we still need those things to a degree, but I think this is so important to look at first before having to go to them.
100%. Because it's looking at that root cause.
Yeah, it's about getting the body to be able to produce them themselves without having to prescribe. Yeah. And for those listening, those neurotransmitters like serotonin and dopamine and GABA are basically those calming, feel good, motivating neurotransmitters that if you're on an antidepressant, for example, that's like a serotonin reuptake inhibitor that's trying to help your mood. So, that could be making you recycle your serotonin. But if you can get to the cause of like pyrroles, for example, where you're not producing or you don't have those cofactors, which are like the glues and the nails to a house, really.
Yeah.
And the building blocks, you know, are the big things like the bricks and the wood are more like the actual proteins. It's just kind of making sure you're covering the glues and the nails, all the foundational stuff before going to the big stuff.
Yeah, for sure. And if you need the big stuff, whatever, they're there. But a lot of the time you don't need to if you can master Pyrroles treatment. It makes a big difference.
Massive.
Yeah.
Anyway, I hope that made sense when I'm rambling on there.
Okay.
So we've touched on dosaging for treatment, which I think is great. Can you talk about like duration of treatment?
Yeah, generally we say it is more of a longer term thing. But I will say to most of my clients, generally we'll start to see results within like 4 to 6 weeks is what I like to say. We can definitely see them much sooner. Some people can take a bit longer. However, I do say to clients it is, more of a long-term thing. So especially if you're not fixing what sort of caused it in the first place, you're always going to have that higher demand. So if you're not fixing the gut or treating your adrenals or removing yourself from them stressful situations, you're always going to need that constant influx because, you know, stress will just deplete more of those nutrients as time goes on. So most of my clients I find within like 6 to 12 months are probably at their peak, and then it sort of continues, and then we kind of work on reducing their dose as well and getting them more into that lower dose maintenance dose. I've had a few clients definitely be able to come off their treatment, but they have been on it for a much longer time, you know, like 5-10 years or so.
Okay. Do you happen to use any compounding products?
I don't personally. I'm not a massive fan of compounding because I feel like you can't adjust the dose as much as you need. So.
Okay. Do you work with, and what about with like children and stuff like that? Are you just getting them to like crush up tablets? What are you prescribing there?
Normally I'm using similar to what I do with the adults, but just getting the adults to open up their capsules, mixing them, you know, in some water or their food, and just adjusting the dose that way.
Okay. Yep. Yeah. Great.
I just find, with Pyrroles, I guess if there is that extra stress, you know, the symptoms can come back and you might need to increase that dose short term to overcome it. Like for my partner, for example, like if he's had a really busy week at work or being super physically active, I'll notice his symptoms sort of come on a little bit more. So the next day or two, I might give him an extra zinc, for example, which will have antibiotics in it, and like that just resets him.
Yeah,
so I just have greater flexibility doing it that way, but everyone's different. So
yeah, I work a lot with children, babies, toddlers that have eczema and that sort of stuff. So often it's hard. There's no way around doing things besides like a compounding cream. But yeah, I understand exactly what you're saying, especially when you're working with adults. The dosing is easier to adjust for sure, and it's a lot cheaper to prescribe through a supplement.
I've looked into compounding creams for my children as well, but the mum's like, nah, it's way too expensive, you know, it's just not affordable. But, you know, if money's not an issue, go for it. It does make it a lot easier.
But no, that's really good information there. Okay, so what are the things you see, like, you know, with people when they start their Pyrroles? What are the main symptoms you start to notice? And I know everyone's different, but can you just touch on, like, within those first couple of weeks, what people start to experience?
Yeah, I find definitely, like, if anxiety is an issue, I find that starts to reduce. People's energy is a big thing, so I find energy kind of lifts, brain fog sort of lifts. They just feel more within their body. Sometimes sleep will improve. It's more, I guess, just that general sense of calmness that they sort of start to feel more control, more regulation over their emotions.
Yeah.
So I always like to use a scale in clinic, so I'll always tell people, you know, okay, what's your anxiety out of 10? You know, at the start, what's your sleep out of 10? What's your mood? What is all of this, so we can actually track it as time goes on. So, you know, once you get, you know, people might come in and they're saying, you know, my anxiety is an 8 or 10 out of 10, which, you know, is quite debilitating for a lot of people. But it's, you know, fast forward a few weeks or a few months, whatever, and, you know, they're like, it's a 2 out of 10 or it doesn't even exist. So I find that's definitely a big thing. Or, fatigue and brain fog is huge as well. That's something I find most people will definitely benefit from. Better concentration, being able to focus more.
And do you find that a lot of patients, sometimes they do, but often they won't realize how much they've had an improvement in their symptoms until you actually have this conversation and get them to rate it. And then you're like, well, when you first came in, you're an 8 out of 10 and now you're a 3 out of 10. And they're like, oh yeah, wow, actually I do feel better.
100%. 100%. And I like to do a little trial with people as well. So I always say, once you're feeling good, I will get them to stop their dose for a day or two so they can actually feel how they feel. Because with Pyroluria, we know as soon as you stop taking it, your symptoms basically return. So some people, they might have that return straight away. Some a bit more delayed in a few days' time. So I think it's always good, stop it for a day or two, see how you feel, and they feel pretty shitty and they get straight back on it. And they realize more once they've felt good and then feel bad again.
Yeah, definitely. So how are you following up with your patients? Are you running more bloods, and when are you doing this? When do you do the hair tissue test again, if you do it?
Yeah. So generally I'll always do baseline bloods. We'll work on correcting any deficiencies. I'll often recheck in let's say 3 months time. If in terms of general Pyroluria bloods, I'd probably want to do every 6 months or so, just to make sure everything's intact and we're not actually low in copper too much or homocysteine too much. Hair tissue mineral analysis, I will do initially and then retest about 3 to 4 months later, because that's the cycle we're sort of looking at. Yeah.
Okay.
And then on treatment, how they're responding, if it's smooth, if it's not, if we need to intervene sooner.
Okay. And who are you using for your hair tissue testing?
Interclinical labs.
Okay. Yeah.
I'd say they're probably gold standard to use.
Definitely. Yeah. Okay, cool. Well, I feel like you've given us, I know it was very short and fast, but people can re-listen to it, so they can always pause and go back if they felt like there was something they missed, which I love about a podcast. But is there anything else you want to kind of summarize, or any pearls of wisdom you want to leave us with Pyrroles?
I just feel like if you've always got this cluster of symptoms that never have an answer for, definitely look into Pyrroles, because often it'll be the glue that's missing for you, and it can just make such a big difference, life-changing to people. So if you're one who's always suffered from anxiety, definitely consider testing it, because good chance it could be an issue. Or if you've always had these skin issues or poor immune system or gut issues, look into it, because it just makes such a big difference to treat. I guess one thing to note though is not every practitioner knows how to treat Pyrroles or even understands it. So I've had many clients come to me where it's never been picked up before, where straight away I'm like, actually I think this is what's going on. So finding that practitioner that understands Pyrroles, knows how to treat it, can be there to actually handhold you and guide you in them initial stages is super important as well. I always say to my clients, you message me whenever you need to over the next month or two until we get to your baseline, because sometimes it can be up and down and you need to know what to do along the way. I think having that guidance is super important. Yeah,
very good point, because I don't think it's not taught in college, and it is something that people need to do a lot of extra training to really understand.
Yeah, and if you don't understand it, you can definitely make things worse, so you need to know what you're doing. Yeah.
All right, well, thank you so much for, giving us that little snapshot of Pyrroles, the treatment, what people can expect, because it can be such a life-changing treatment for people, or, even just to get that kind of oh my gosh, this is the missing link.
This could be a thing.
Yeah. So, I just want to say thank you for coming on and sharing your wisdom. We're going to go into part 2 now, which is going to be more for, practitioners on marketing, because you're such a savvy little marketer. But if anyone, I know you're actually not taking new clients at the moment, so we can just refer them, I guess, if they'd like to find you, to your social links. Would that be the best way?
Yeah, that's probably the best way. So I only do face-to-face in Canberra as well. So I don't actually do online just because I'm beyond capacity. But we can refer them just to my social media. I do like to post, interesting topics on there and really educate people and provide that free education, so then they can take that and do what they need to do with that piece of information.
Awesome. So I'll pop all them in the show links for anyone that wants to check out Michelle's education that she's so good at sharing.
Thanks, Sandy.
All right. Thanks, Michelle.
All good.
Thanks for tuning in to this podcast on Pyrroles. I really hope you enjoyed that episode. I just want to let you know that I have my Wild Bloom online children's health course now available. It's basically a summary of 2 years of me putting together all the information on naturopathic and Chinese medicine for children, how to raise them from the get-go, from postnatal health, babies and infants, toddlers, childhood nutrition, and all your common health conditions. So this is a great course for parents and patients. It's also great for young savvy naturopaths and Chinese medicine practitioners that would like to learn more about children's health. So you can check that out at herearthmedicine.com and use the code BLOOM to get $50 off that course. I also have my Shoni Shin tools, which are pediatric tools that are really good for helping to encourage wellness within children. They are these amazing medical grade stainless steel metals that you basically run along the meridians, and there's all these instructional videos that you get when you purchase the tools that come along with them. So they are great to help with digestion, immunity, and just overall wellness, and they are also available at herearthmedicine.com. And to book an appointment with myself, simply go to herearthmedicine.com and you can find an appointment there. For those of you that are overseas and the time zone doesn't work, please send an email to sandylouiseross@gmail.com and I will try and fit you in a time zone that's suitable for you. And lastly, if you like this episode, please leave a review. That would really help me so much, and share this episode, because these things we do out of the kindness of our heart to really help educate parents, patients, everyone out there. So I would love a review from you. So thank you so much and have a beautiful day.